What started as an ordinary walk with the family dog quickly unraveled into something far more sinister. Nancy thought she was just keeping a family promise to her parents while they were on holiday. But deep beneath the park, something ancient had been waiting, watching, and it was hungry. Tonight, we follow Nancy along her final walk and the terrifying truth that followed. I'm the Gingerbeard Man, and if you're a fan of the macabre, mysterious, or miraculous, told through an African and South African lens, then you've come to the right place. Grab the lead, we're going for a walk. Nancy Roberts grabbed the lead and headed towards the gate. She was almost knocked out of the way by her Labrador, who could no longer hold its excitement for its daily walk. She walked to the back of the car, opened up, and Cujo immediately sprung in. As soon as he was in the car, he began barking at the rear passenger window, waiting impatiently for Nancy to open it. Nancy started the car and lowered the window down halfway. Cujo immediately stuck his head out of the window. She drove off, Cujo, head and tongue hanging out, barking at everything they passed by. Nancy was taking him for his daily walk. The spot that she was taking him to was not far from her parents' house. Her parents were away on holiday. They had timeshares at the coast. Nancy, being in her second year of university, was on holiday as well. And even though her parents offered her a spot, or should I say a room in the holiday home, she decided to stay home instead. But she promised that in addition to watching the house, she would take care of the pet Cujo as well. Cujo was still young, and even though Nancy's parents had taken him to puppy training, the only person he listened to really was Nancy's father, Stephen. The drive to the park only took about 5 minutes. They reached the park at about 10 a.m. Being a normal Wednesday morning, most people were at work, so the park was deserted, just the way Nancy liked it. She found a shady space to park and got out the car. Cujo had encoiled himself and was now barking at the closed door, desperate to get out and to begin his walk. Nancy opened the door. It was only opened halfway before Cujo pushed the door fully open, almost knocking Nancy over for a second time that day. "Cujo, sit," Nancy firmly commanded. Cujo stared at Nancy, wagging his tail, eventually understanding. No lead, no walk. Nancy clipped the lead into Cujo's collar and locked the car door just in time for Cujo to begin dragging her. "Cujo, wait," she shouted. The dog stopped and looked up at Nancy with a bewildered look on its face. Nancy took out her phone and set the 20-minute time limit. She had plans that afternoon and didn't want to run late. She put her phone in one pocket, the car keys in the other pocket. "Okay, Cujo, let's go." She dug her heels into the ground to prevent Cujo from dragging her off again. Cujo was off, tail wagging, sniffing around. He was following his usual route, barking every now and then. Nancy followed along absent-mindedly, not paying much attention to the familiar surroundings. After about 10 minutes of exploring, they reached the edge of the small stream that separated the park from the gym across the road. Nancy was a member of this gym and attended it consistently. Thus, she was well known by most of the staff, including the 2 gentlemen who were hired to watch over the cars while people gymmed. She preferred walking Cujo along this route when her parents weren't here. If she felt uncomfortable, or if she got into any sort of trouble, she could easily ask for assistance from the gentleman who watched the cars. As she approached the stream, she looked over and saw that the gym was pretty much empty. This, however, was not unusual. Most people, even though it was December, were at work this time of the day. Nancy was lucky. She had written her final exam last week and now was enjoying a 2-month-long holiday. She would only have to go back to class mid-February next year. Nancy did not see Clive or Wesley. These were the usual men assigned to watching the cars while people gymmed. Instead, she saw a man that she did not recognize. Regardless, she waved, and the man waved back. Nancy pulled Cujo closer to her, quickly scanning the area for other animals or pets. After seeing that the park was empty, Nancy pointed to the floor. "Sit, boy," she said. The dog sat down, but couldn't keep itself still, its butt and tail swaying from side to side. Cujo knew what part of the walk was coming next, and this part of his walk happened to be his favorite. Nancy unclipped the lead from Cujo's collar. The dog sat patiently, waiting for Nancy to give the word. Nancy and Cujo made eye contact. "Go swim, boy." Cujo bolted and launched himself into the stream. The water was clean and relatively shallow, so Nancy was not worried about Cujo drowning or getting sick from drinking the water. The dog splashed around, running up the bank and then jumping into the stream. The dog repeated this process again and again. After a while, the alarm on Nancy's phone sounded. She removed the phone from her pocket and switched the alarm off. She was about to call Cujo back when she spotted a cat further along the stream. "Damn," she said. Cujo noticed the cats as well and made a beeline for it. "Cujo! Cujo!" He stopped for a second, staring at Nancy, tail wagging. Then once more he bolted off, chasing after the cat. The stream curved to the side, and by the time Nancy got around the bend, Cujo was out of sight. "Cujo! Cujo!" She began calling him, getting irritated. But then all of a sudden her heart sank. She changed from anger to fear. She could hear, somewhere ahead of her, the dog was whimpering in pain. Nervously, Nancy swore under her breath. The whimpering was coming from the other side of the overhead bridge. The only way to pass through from the side of the stream was to go through the concrete sewerage tunnels. These tunnels were not very long, but they were quite small. Nancy was claustrophobic and really didn't want to go through the tunnels, but Cujo's whimpering was becoming more urgent. She mustered up all of her courage, took a deep breath, and crouched through the tunnel. She went through the tunnel on the right, being careful not to let her sundress dip into the dirty water below. She pinched her nose. The smell was putrid. The further she went along the tunnel, the more uneasy she felt. There were gang symbols spray painted on the inside, as well as pieces of leftover food and cooking utensils. It was clear that someone was living in these tunnels, and Nancy really didn't want to disturb them. After what felt like a lifetime, but in reality was only about 30 seconds, Nancy reached the end of the tunnel. Once out of the tunnel, Nancy began scanning the undergrowth for the source of the dog's whimpering. After searching for a while, she eventually saw a hole in the undergrowth. She rushed over and looked inside the hole. Her heart sank. Cujo was wedged about halfway down the hole, desperately trying to get out. Nancy got her hands and knees and attempted to pull Cujo out of the hole. The more she tugged, the more the dog yelped. Nancy began panicking. She looked around. There was no one to assist her. Eventually, she took out her phone and called her father. However, the phone rang and rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail. Nancy composed herself. She told herself that she was going to try one more time, and if she couldn't get the dog out, she would go and get help. She knelt down once more, no longer worried about getting her sundress full of mud. This time, she gripped Cujo by the collar, digging her nails underneath his collar to get a firm grip. She pulled with all her might, leaning back whilst doing so. She also called Cujo, edging him on. The dog slowly began to rise from the hole. With one final tug, she managed to pull Cujo out just enough that he could get his front paws out of the hole. With Nancy's pulling and Cujo's digging, he managed to eventually pull himself out of the hole. He leapt out, running to Nancy. She was so relieved she didn't care that he was making her dress wet, muddy, and smelly. She rubbed the dog on the head, just relieved that she had got him out of the hole. She held his head, looking into his eyes, concerned, relieved, and happy. Then she noticed there was blood just underneath his collar. She realized that when she had dug her nails into his collar, she had accidentally cut the dog's throat. Not very deep, just enough to leave a small trail of blood. Nancy released Cujo's head from her hands. She stood up, a bit shaken from the whole ordeal. Cujo, however, didn't seem to be bothered. He was already wagging his tail, sniffing around, clearly looking for a new route to discover. Nancy had had enough, though. Firmly, she said, "Cujo!" Pointed to the tunnel. "Home!" Cujo, noticing the seriousness in her voice, obeyed immediately this time. He slowly walked through the tunnel, Nancy not far behind. Once out of the tunnel, they crossed the stream and went back to the car. Once at the car, Nancy took out a silver bowl and a bottle of water. She filled up the water and allowed Cujo to drink. After that, she opened the back door. Cujo leapt in, turned to the door, and started his antics again, barking at the window, waiting for Nancy to lower it. Nancy got into the car, and they drove off. Nancy had only been driving for a minute or two when her phone began ringing. Not recognizing the number, she answered reluctantly. "Hello?" She immediately recognized the lady on the other side of the line as Drew, one of the ladies who was working at the gym. "Hi, is this Nancy?" Drew asked. "Speaking," said Nancy. "I'm sorry to worry you, ma'am, but it seems as if you have lost your dog. He doesn't have a collar on, but I saw you walking him a few minutes ago. Does he go by the name of Cujo?" "That's right," Nancy replied, barely able to get the words out of her mouth. "I think something spooked him," Drew continued. "When I approached him, he ran off." Nancy dropped her phone, and her blood went cold. She looked into the rearview mirror to see Cujo sitting up and uncoiling himself. Their eyes met in the mirror, Cujo's eyes turning from dark brown to red. Drew was still on the other end of the phone, but Nancy couldn't answer. "Hey Nancy, why did you hurt me?" it said. "I thought we were friends." Nancy felt something heavy on her shoulder. Not a dog's paw, not a human hand, something different. She then felt tremendous pressure holding her into her seat. The massive creature climbed to its knees, revealing its full, terrifying size. Nancy felt a sharp nail scratching her neck, just deep enough to draw blood. The blood began pouring down slowly. Instinctively, Nancy moved her hand from the steering wheel to her neck to stop the bleeding. In doing so, she lost control of the car. It veered off of the side of the road and down an embankment, luckily missing all the nearby trees. Nancy bumped her head on the steering wheel, and everything went blank. She opened her eyes slowly, the light making her squint. She lifted her head delicately. Her head was pounding with pain. For some reason, she was sitting on the back seat of the car. She looked at the window and saw Cujo staring at her. "Cujo?" she said, confused, but words didn't come out of her mouth. Instead, a sharp bark. She raised her hand to her mouth, but as she did so, Cujo raised his right paw, and then it sunk in. She wasn't looking at Cujo. She was looking at her own reflection. Desperately, she attempted to stand, to shout, to do something human. However, she just sounded as Cujo would normally sound when he waited for the window to be open when they took him for his daily walks. She felt pressure around her neck and spun her head around to see her doppelganger putting a collar on her. Cujo's collar. A tear trickled down the dog's cheek. What was going on? She watched in horror as Nancy, herself, who she used to be, climbed into the front seat of the car. She put the seatbelt on, turning her body to face Cujo. "Right, let's get this car off the road before anyone gets suspicious." The car pulled off, Nancy shouting, barking for all she was worth. "Let me introduce myself, Nancy, or should I say Cujo," the creature said, laughing. "I've been around for centuries. Some call me a shapeshifter, some a skinwalker. Doesn't really matter to me. There are only a few of us left in South Africa since you humans began taking over all of our land. That place where you walk your dog, where the filthy humans have built their sewers and pipes, is sacred to me. It is where I rest, where I hibernate. And this morning, you and your dog woke me from my slumber." The The dog stopped barking out the window. Sad, it looked at the creature. I am hungry, hungrier than usual. I'm tired of eating strays and animals. I'm in the mood for something different, something human. Nancy's phone began to ring. The creature cleared its throat a few times to make sure it would get Nancy's voice right before answering the phone. Hi, Dad, the creature answered in the exact copy of Nancy's voice. Nancy's dad explained that he had gotten a phone call from the gym. Something about Cujo being missing and the call to Nancy going dead. No, that's just a misunderstanding, replied the creature. Cujo is right here with me. Cujo pulled her head out of the window, shouting desperately for her dad. However, only barking came out of her mouth. I hear Cujo is vocal as usual, her dad said on the other end of the phone. Oh, you know how you can get, Dad. Tell me, when do you guys get home again? Nancy's dad said that they would get home tomorrow afternoon, but they would be way too tired to cook, so they would order takeout for supper. Oh no, Dad, don't worry about that. I have special plans for supper for both you and Mom. Ah, you're the sweetest, replied her dad. Not as sweet as you, Dad. I could just eat you up. The creature looked back at Nancy in the rearview mirror, licking its lips and giving her a wink. Clive, who had been off sick on Wednesday, was standing in the busy parking lot of the gym on Saturday morning, doing his usual job, watching cars and greeting customers as they entered and exited the gym. He looked across the road and saw Nancy walking her dog. He waved at her, and she returned the greeting. He couldn't help but notice that Nancy looked different. It wasn't that she had put on weight. She just seemed odd. He turned and went back to greeting customers in the parking lot. Nancy's parents hadn't been seen or heard from since. Nancy unclipped the lead from Cujo's collar, which now read, Nancy. Nancy's story is one that chills the bones. A reminder that not all legends stay buried, and not all family pets are what they seem. Somewhere out there in the quiet places we walk every day, something waits, watching, hungry. The question is, who will it choose next? Let me know in the comments below if you have ever had an encounter with a shapeshifter or skinwalker. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious. God bless.